What does a 15-year-old girl do when she is carrying an illegitimate child and the location of the father is unknown? Today, being pregnant without a husband is of no interest to anyone. In a Mormon society of 1966, that's a different matter. A drunken night of unprotected sex can change your entire life and ruin the life of an innocent victim. I'm Carl Lewis, Sr. Hello, and welcome into our home as I share with you this autobiography of the life that I had with this evil girl. Let me take you way back in time to that fateful year. This story contains enduring love, infidelity, betrayal, continuously forgiving her indiscretions, and a conspiracy within her family to hide the paternity and later the location of the boys. Long before Roe v. Wade, an abortion was illegal. And if you could find someone to perform a back alley abortion, it usually had a mortality rate as high for the mother as it did for the fetus. What can she do? At 15, she could have the baby without a husband and face being ostracized in a Mormon society during 1966 Utah. She could find an unsuspecting gullible guy and after having sex with him, convince him that he got her pregnant. After all, I was 16 years old and I hadn't been off the farm back in North Carolina for very long. At 16, I thought I knew everything, but what I didn't know was that I would become her scapegoat. Looking back now, I realized that I was only there to give her illegitimate child a different last name and salvage her reputation in a Mormon society. Shauna Greenalch. She always used her stepfather's last name, which was Beauregard, and her married name is Johnson. I met her at a dance while in St. Louis, Missouri during the summer of 1966, and it was love at first sight. We talked briefly, exchanged addresses, and a romance through the U.S. mail soon began. At 16, I had never experienced love before, and the fire of love raged deep within my heart for this girl. I just had to be with her again. At her request to join her in Utah, I started the long bus ride to Twilla and arrived February 4th. I was hastily moved into a basement bedroom at her stepfather's house and we had sex that night as we did for several months. After about a week, she told me that her period had started and sex could resume after it was over. Later in March, she proudly announced that she was pregnant and I was the father of her child. We soon married at the courthouse. I was so deeply in love with this girl I couldn't see the facts as they were. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her and our baby. In August, a premature boy was born and we named him Carl Ellis Lewis. Shauna and her mother Barb talked continuously about how well developed he was for having been a premature baby. I developed tonsillitis in November and I went to our doctor. I tried to read our family folder as I waited for him to come into the room. Upon his entry, I asked him what did he mean by the entry, patient had completed her first trimester, and he explained that in March, Shauna was 3 months pregnant. I moved out immediately. My foolish pride wouldn't allow me to ask my parents for help. I had no money or any place to go, and the only option I had was to move back with her at her stepfather's house in the basement bedroom. Later, I learned to live with it, and I forgave her as I did many times in the future. I accepted the painful truth that I wasn't the father of my son, but I was going to raise Carl as my son. Once, later on down the road, Barb had gotten drunk and she told me that the two of them went out to party Thanksgiving night in 1966. But they got separated after Shauna became drunk. Shauna agreed to go home, but apparently she met a GI who was stationed out at Twilla Army Depot and she spent the night with him. That night, Shauna got drunk, Shauna got laid, and Shauna got pregnant. By the time Shauna realized that she was pregnant, Rick Bejour's time in the Army was up and he returned to New Orleans. In those days, if a girl could pass for an adult, A man wasn't really concerned with her age. She was bigger and taller than most girls her age. And because of the makeup she used, she could pass for a woman. March of 1969, my solution arrived. I joined the Army during the height of the Vietnam conflicts. After completing my stateside training, I boarded a plane for Asia. I hated it so much over there that I re-enlisted for 6 years just to get out of that hellhole. Once my tour was complete, I returned to Utah unannounced with my pockets full of cash from the re-enlistment bonus. I got off the plane about 1 a.m. and took a taxicab to Twila so I could surprise everyone. I was very excited to be back home again. I let myself in using the key I still carried. The key was always a piece of home that I carried with me everywhere. Once, inside the bedroom, I discovered 2 forms in my bed. All I could do was just stand there. Returning home after spending time in a combat zone only to find my loving wife lying in bed with someone was a shock that no one should have to endure. Finally, I went into the kitchen, sat down to think things through. I sat there hoping someone would walk from the bedroom because I was going to kill them. After several hours, I returned to the airport and flew to L.A. I called Barb to explain what I had just seen and to tell her that I was sorry I didn't get to see her. I remained in L.A. until it was time for me to report my new duty assignment in Hawaii. Months after settling into my new duty assignment, Barb called and informed me that Shauna wanted to get back together. Looking back, I realized that she must have wanted to be in Hawaii more than she wanted to be with the other figure in my bed. I really loved her, and I was desperate to have a life with her and Carl. Soon they arrived. Almost immediately, Shauna wanted to have another baby. We sought medical assistance after all attempts had failed. Results of the test revealed that my sperm count was really low. The stresses associated with having spent time in a hazardous fire zone caused my sperm count to bottom out to 0. I guess she wanted another child to strengthen the bond between the two of us. Later, she announced that she was pregnant. The night before Shauna and Carl left Hawaii, Shauna told me that the doctor told her today that we only had 3 more weeks before the baby was due. Counting back 9 months on the calendar from the new due date revealed that I wasn't on the island for 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after that date. My infantry battalion was on another island for a month long of training. For a month-long training exercise. Next day after their departure, I started an allotment check to be sent monthly. On 3 separate occasions, I returned to Utah on Bob's insistence, hoping to reconcile our differences. Several times each year, I called her stepfather, trying to talk to the boys. No luck each time. On numerous occasions each year, thinking that it would go through this time, I would write a letter to the boys and send it to social services in Utah. Again, no luck. Approximately every 6.5 years or so, Shauna would file a complaint with social services for back child support. Several weeks later, she would call back and inform them that I was current. It was difficult and time-consuming for social services to collect from a delinquent father who lived in another state. This continued until Jeff's 18th birthday. This time she filed and allowed it to go through the collection process. Social services wouldn't give me the location of the boys, but they could tell me of any activities my ex-wife had made in our file. Her evil plan was to wait until Jeff was 18 so a judge wouldn't force her to give me the location of the boys. Apparently, she felt the risk was too great to allow me to pay child support monthly because I could have access to the boys, and she was afraid that I would tell the boys that I wasn't their father. An attorney in Utah once told me that if my support was current, she could be taken to court and forced to allow visitation. For many years, I was convinced that I was sterile. In 1980, my current wife and I had a son. Early December of 1976, I arranged to talk to Shauna at her stepfather's house